I was really glad to get the chance to dive into these details because I've been wanting to revisit the Labyrinth for a long time. However, there's just been recently a bunch of new data that came up about things that happened.
Archaeologists just pushed a specialized radar over the Hawara Desert, and the results are turning the world of history upside down. Underneath the feet of the researchers lies a giant stone footprint that measures 1,000 feet by 800 feet.
The Labyrinth has multiple levels, and it's almost like imagine yourself standing in a shopping mall, and you have that central atrium where you can see all these levels, and it's like this big central chamber that connects to these multiple levels.
This is the lost Labyrinth of Egypt, a place once called the greatest wonder of the world. While everyone was looking at the Giza pyramids, this giant complex was waiting in the shadows. To put it in simple words, we have found a building that is 10 times bigger than most ancient temples. It changed everything, no question about it, and the data shows it is still mostly intact. New tech rewrites Egypt. To start things off, we have to look at the moment everything changed for Egyptian history. For a long time, the area known as Hawara was just a place with a crumbling pyramid and a lot of salt water. Most people thought there was nothing left to find. But in 2008, a group called the Mataha Expedition decided to use modern tools to see what was really down there. They brought in ground-penetrating radar, which is like an X-ray for the Earth. They were looking for a legendary maze that ancient writers had talked about for centuries. When they started scanning the ground south of the pyramid, the machines began to beep. What they saw on their screens was enough to make any expert jump. Deep under the sand, about 30 feet down, the radar showed thick walls and large open spaces. This was not just a few rooms, it was a giant grid that went on for hundreds of feet. The data showed that these walls were made of very thick stone, likely limestone or even granite. This is the tiny detail that almost everyone misses when they talk about old ruins. Most buildings from that time would have fallen apart, but this structure was so solid that it stayed together even under the weight of the desert. The team found that the maze had a footprint of about 1,000 feet long and 800 feet wide. That is huge. To put it in perspective, you could fit several football fields inside that space. The radar showed that the rooms were lined up in a very specific way, creating a massive pattern of squares and rectangles. This matches the old stories about a labyrinth with 12 covered courts. But here's where it gets tricky. The scientists did not just find one floor. The radar suggested there were levels below the first one. This means the building was like an underground skyscraper. This is the part that makes absolutely no sense if you think the ancients only had simple tools. How could they dig that deep and build such big stone rooms without the ceiling falling in? The researchers were amazed to see that the stone slabs used for the roof were still in place in many areas. This means that if we could get down there, we might find rooms that have not seen the light of day in over 2,000 years. The team also noticed that the material of the walls was very dense. It was not just mud brick, it was heavy, high-quality stone. If you take away all the noise, it is about this. We have found a massive, high-tech stone building that was buried on purpose or by time. That is just the tip of the iceberg when it comes to what is hiding in the dark. While everyone was looking over here at the pyramids, this giant project was sitting right under their feet. The discovery of these walls proves that the ancient writers were not making things up. They were describing a real place that was likely the most complex building ever made. But finding it on a radar screen is one thing, and actually getting inside is another. There are many layers of dirt and water that stand in the way. But the radar does not lie, and the shapes it found are too perfect to be natural rock. They are clearly man-made. This is the real story that has been hidden for so long. The part that nobody talks about is how they managed to keep it a secret for this long. It seems like the Earth itself wanted to protect this maze from the outside world. But even with this amazing proof, the path to opening the maze was blocked by more than just sand. Words from the past. Fast forward a little bit, and we have to ask why people were looking for this place to begin with. The only reason we knew it existed was because of people who lived thousands of years ago. A man named Herodotus visited Egypt about 2,500 years ago. He was a famous traveler who saw the pyramids and the great city of Thebes. But when he saw the labyrinth at Hawara, he said it was way better than all of those. He wrote that the maze had 3,000 rooms in total. Half of them were above ground and the other half were below. He said the rooms were so beautiful and the carvings on the walls were so detailed that it was hard to believe. Most folks have no idea that he actually walked through the top part of the building. He said the maze was divided into 12 big courts with doors that faced each other. He wanted to go into the lower rooms, but the priests told him no. They said the bottom rooms were where the kings and the sacred crocodiles were kept. Believe it or not, it gets even weirder. Another writer named Strabo also visited the site much later. He said the place was so confusing that you would get lost immediately without a guide. He described the halls as having very long paths that twisted and turned in every direction. This is the part that trips everyone up when they try to map it out. If you look at his notes, he says the roof was made of a single giant stone for each room. That would mean the stones were massive and weighed many tons. If you take away all the noise, it is about the skill of the workers. They were able to move these giant blocks and fit them together so perfectly that you could barely see the lines between them. Another man named Pliny said the labyrinth was already 3,600 years old when he saw it. If that is true, it was built way before many of the other famous Egyptian sites. This is the tiny detail that almost everyone misses. If the labyrinth is that old, it means the Egyptians had incredible building skills much earlier than we thought. He also said the building was so strong that even time and people trying to break it could not destroy it. It changed everything, no question about it, because it shows that this was the most important building in the country. It was a place for government, religion, and storage. It was basically the brain of ancient Egypt. But as the centuries went by, the building seemed to vanish. The desert has a way of swallowing things whole. Sand blew over the top, and the nearby canal caused the ground to get wet and muddy. People eventually forgot exactly where the entrance was. For hundreds of years, it was just a legend that people read about in old books. Many explorers came to Egypt and looked for the maze, but they only found small pieces of stone or broken walls. They started to think that maybe Herodotus was exaggerating, maybe the maze was not that big. But the ancient writers were very specific. They gave measurements and descriptions that were very clear. They all agreed that it was a wonder of the world. Wait, there is one big problem with these old stories that nobody could explain for a long time. Hidden beneath the rubble. Let's switch gears for a second and look at the first man who actually found proof on the ground. His name was Flinders Petrie, and he was a very famous archaeologist in the late 1800s. He went to Hawara because he wanted to find the labyrinth and prove the old stories were true. When he got there, the site was a mess. There was a lot of trash, old brick houses, and salty water everywhere. He started digging near the pyramid and found a huge layer of limestone chips. This is the part that makes absolutely no sense until you realize what it means. Limestone chips are what you get when people break apart big stone buildings to use the stone for something else. Petrie thought that meant the labyrinth had been destroyed by people long ago. He thought they took the stones to build other things. However, he did find a giant stone platform. When he measured it, it was about 1,000 feet by 800 feet. This matched the size that Herodotus talked about. To say it was big is not even the half of it. Petrie was sure he had found the footprint of the labyrinth. But here's the snag. He only looked at the top layer. He thought that because the top was gone, the whole thing was gone. He did not have the technology to see what was underneath the platform. Most folks have no idea that he was standing right on top of the secret. He spent months mapping the site and found some small pieces of statues and columns, but he never found the 3,000 rooms. He eventually left and told the world that the labyrinth was mostly destroyed. Because he was so famous, everyone believed him for over 100 years. People stopped looking for the maze because they thought it was just a foundation now. But if you look a little closer, you find the real story was still waiting. The limestone chips he found might have just been from the very top part of the building. The lower rooms that the priest talked about would have been much deeper. Petrie did not have the tools to dig 30 or 40 feet down through the mud and water. He was working with simple shovels and a small team. He did a great job for his time, but he missed the biggest part of the discovery. Plain and simple, so he only saw the roof of the mystery. That brings us right to the next big mystery that modern science found. Seeing through the earth. This is the part that makes absolutely no sense to traditional history books. After the Mataha expedition found the walls in 2008, another group started using satellites to look at the site. A team from a company called Merlin Burroughs used military-grade scans to see even deeper into the earth. What they found sounds like something out of a science fiction movie, but it is 100% real. Their scans showed that there are actually 5 different levels of buildings stacked on top of each other. Each level is separated by thick stone floors. To put it in simple words, the labyrinth is like an underground city. The scans showed long hallways with columns and huge rooms that are still empty. This means they are not filled with dirt, they are hollow and preserved. But it gets even crazier. In the middle of the complex, the satellite found a massive object that is about 130 feet long. When they checked the signal, it did not look like stone or wood. It gave off a signature that looks like metal. They gave this object a nickname, but nobody knows what it actually is. It is shaped like a giant capsule or a pill. There is nothing like this in any other ancient Egyptian site. Most folks have no idea that such a huge metal object could be sitting under the sand for thousands of years. The scans show that it is sitting in a very large, dry chamber deep in the lower levels. The satellite data also showed that while the top part of the site is wet, the deeper parts are bone dry. This is because the ancient builders used very thick stone to seal the lower levels. If this is true, it means there could be books, paintings, and treasures down there that look brand new. We could find the actual records of how they built the pyramids or the history of the kings who lived before the dynasties. This is the part that makes people really excited. We are not just looking at a building, we are looking at a giant time capsule. The scans reveal a grid that is so perfect it looks like it was made with a computer. Is the government hiding the truth about the labyrinth to protect our history, or are they just afraid of what is inside? This massive maze could change everything we know about the world. What do you think is waiting in those 3,000 rooms? Let me know in the comments, like this video, and subscribe for more mysteries.